Scene 1408. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
In 1983, orbiting high above Earth, the Orbiter 4 spacecraft housed two spirited cosmonauts. One of them, a jovial soul, playfully teased his companion Kostya with threats of reporting him to mission control for his lack of singing. Amidst their banter, they excitedly discussed their plans for when they returned home. Meanwhile, mission control diligently monitored their progress. As Kostya deftly released the spacecraft's docking latches, they prepared for undocking. Once again, their comrade burst into song as they assumed the landing position. However, an unexpected collision shook their vessel. Struggling to regain control, they peered through the window to witness an eerie presence moving towards their hatch. Later, a parachute gently descended from the heavens, marking their arrival over Soviet Kazakhstan. A solitary horseback rider cautiously approached the crash site. With a flashlight in hand, he discovered one of the cosmonauts lifeless beside the wreckage. The other, barely clinging to consciousness, emerged from the vessel just as the stranger drew near. When the injured cosmonaut raised his head, blood spilled from his mouth, and his eyes were consumed by darkness. In Moscow, a woman made her way into a conference room at the Research Institute for Brain AMS. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation as the room readied itself for an impending hearing. Board members arrived, taking their seats as the investigation began. Tatiana found herself under scrutiny for a potential injury inflicted upon a patient. Despite her colleagues' trust in her methods, a trace of negligence lingered in their minds. Tatiana staunchly defended her actions, asserting that she had done what was necessary to rectify a misdiagnosis. In the lobby, a man observed the proceedings, later introducing himself as Colonel Semiradov. He approached Tatiana, seeking her expertise as a consultant for a patient. He revealed his role in a unique research institute, extending an intriguing offer. Tatiana's initial apprehension began to wane as Colonel Semiradov revealed his involvement in neuropsychiatry. He offered to take her to see the patient, assuring her that if she chose not to work the case, he would arrange for her return. As they journeyed in a helicopter, they delved into the enigmatic patient's background. Tatiana requested access to the patient's medical records, but instead, Semiradov provided her with an oral briefing. The startling revelation unfolded. The patient was none other than one of the Orbiter 4 cosmonauts, Kostya. Semiradov unveiled a hidden side of the story, a carefully guarded secret. Kostya appeared to be afflicted by episodic amnesia, unable to recollect the harrowing incident that transpired in space prior to their landing on Earth. This revelation left Tatiana pondering the weight of her involvement, considering the potential implications for a Soviet national hero. Their journey led them to Kazakhstan, where they arrived at a scientific research institute. Semiradov explained that she would have access to 90% of the facility and, once her clearance was secured, the restricted areas as well. Inside an elevator, they ascended to an observation room. In the adjacent chamber, Kostya found himself under the gaze of a psychiatrist attempting to unlock his suppressed memories. Tatiana watched the session through a one-way mirror. Despite the psychiatrist's best efforts, Kostya's responses remained elusive, often masked by playful banter. Frustration gnawed at the doctor, who implored Kostya to let him help. As tension grew, Kostya coughed, unnerving the psychiatrist. Another figure, Dr. Rigel, entered the room, greeted by Semiradov, who introduced him as the research director of the institute. Kostya pounded on the glass, seeking answers about his colleague's fate. Curiosity and determination guided Tatiana's steps as she inquired about Colonel Semiradov's needs. He explained that he sought her expert opinion on Kostya's condition. Walking around to the other side of the window, Tatiana introduced herself to Kostya, offering him a cup of tea, which he accepted gratefully. She observed his every move, gently breaking the ice by asking about the toy in the corner, a cherished cosmonaut tradition. Turning to the matter at hand, Tatiana inquired about the events of the ill-fated mission. Kostya hesitated, wariness etched in his eyes. Despite her lack of access to the mission files, he recounted that everything had proceeded flawlessly until the landing procedure. After that point, his memory was shrouded in darkness until he awoke within the confines of the Institute. Kostya came to a realization, understanding that Tatiana couldn't assist in his immediate release. Still, he confided in her, providing the name and contact information for his mother, requesting that she convey his well-being to his family. Accepting the teacup from Kostya, Tatiana handed it to Dr. Rigel, who winced as the hot liquid seared his hands. She explained to Colonel Semiradov that Kostya exhibited symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, possibly due to damage in his sensory receptors or peripheral nervous system. Having delivered her evaluation, she expressed her desire to depart. However, Semiradov informed her that she could leave in the morning and that her departure would require his authorization. Accompanied by a soldier, Tatiana was led to her room. Along the way, they passed a group of people laboring under supervision. In response to her inquiry, the soldier revealed that they were prisoners assigned to perform grueling tasks. In her solitary room, Tatiana unpacked her belongings and, eager to make an outside call, was disappointed to learn that base protocol dictated that external calls could only be authorized by Colonel Semiradov. That night, after a soothing bath to ease her discomfort, Tatiana's back bore the unmistakable trace of a giant scar. She swallowed a couple of pain relief pills before retiring to bed, but sleep eluded her. Restless, she ventured out for a nighttime run, inadvertently colliding with one of the prisoners. Returning to her room, a sudden knock on the door heralded Colonel Semiradov's presence. He escorted her back to the observation room and inquired about her last meal. After her response, he checked his watch and gave the signal to proceed. A glass window descended to seal off the cosmonaut's chamber, additional soldiers securing the door. Tatiana, along with the others, watched the security camera feed as an unsettling transformation began to afflict Kostya. With a jolt, he tumbled from the bed and an amorphous entity emerged from his mouth, solidifying into an otherworldly creature. Shock and awe washed over Tatiana. Semiradov offered her a chance for a closer look, and she approached the window with trepidation. The alien being reciprocated her gaze. Tatiana tentatively extended her hand toward it, but the creature lunged at the glass. Terrified, she hastily exited the room. Semiradov met her outside, confirming the non-terrestrial nature of the creature. Tatiana was eager to know if Kostya was cognizant of the alien living within him, but that didn't appear to be the case. The colonel presented her with a stark choice: find a way to separate the host from the parasite or leave, and sign a non-disclosure agreement. Perplexed, she questioned why he had chosen her for such a perilous task. His response hinged on her willingness to take risks, as he believed it could save their national hero. Tatiana requested access to the videotapes of the creature, Kostya's testimony, and all available notes. She committed to conducting 2 daily sessions with Kostya, each lasting an hour. Satisfied, the colonel consented to her prolonged stay, leaving Tatiana to grapple with the perplexing and eerie challenge ahead. As Tatiana delved into the documents, a chilling narrative emerged. The cosmonaut had initially been placed in a rehabilitation center, but the alien creature surfaced on the first night, leading to the death of a medical technician. Subsequently, they transferred him to the facility, initiating a series of unsuccessful attempts to extricate the man from the enigmatic entity. Curiously, without the creature coexisting within him, the cosmonaut's vital signs plummeted. However, with the creature inside, he exhibited remarkable regenerative capabilities. Tatiana learned that during the incubation phase, the creature occupied minimal space within Kostya's body. Once outside, it could expand to a formidable 1.5 meters. Its departure from Kostya's body rendered him unconscious, and it could remain outside for approximately 1 hour and 40 to 50 minutes. This eerie creature adhered to a consistent nightly schedule of emergence. A lingering question troubled Tatiana. Was this entity a parasite or a symbiote? Meanwhile, Kostya was observed exercising in a gym under the watchful eye of a doctor, who cautioned him not to overexert himself. The cosmonaut mentioned a minor tickle in his throat, but otherwise, he appeared generally well. While sifting through footage of the creature, Tatiana recorded essential data. Dr. Rigel entered the room, and she inquired about Kostya's son. His response was evasive. She then probed the creature's feeding habits, to which Rigel explained that it consumed the same sustenance as Kostya. Despite her attempts to establish rapport, the doctor deflected her efforts, directing her to speak with Colonel Semiradov. Seeking to check on Kostya's son, Tatiana made a call from the colonel's office to the orphanage where the child resided. On the other end of the line, a paralyzed child miraculously began to move, but a vigilant nurse intervened, reprimanding the child. The following day, Tatiana entered Kostya's room for their session, boldly addressing the concerns raised by those who brought her to the institute. She informed him of the belief that he had lost his sanity and might have caused harm to his co-pilot. Dr. Rigel and Colonel Semiradov monitored the session from the other side of the glass. While the doctor seemed perturbed by her inquiries, the colonel appeared baffled by Kostya's confusion. Kostya expressed his surprise at the notion that he was viewed as a madman and pondered whether this was the sole reason he was held behind reinforced glass. When Tatiana questioned his true identity, he unflinchingly declared himself a hero. She then challenged him on the concept of heroism in spaceflight and swiftly shifted to the topic of his abandoned son, delivering a painful blow to his pride. Offended, he abruptly requested her departure from the session. On the other side of the window, Tatiana recommended testing Kostya's endocrine system, hoping to decipher the creature's dietary requirements by studying his hormonal responses to stress. She then appealed to Colonel Semiradov, requesting that Kostya be moved into the civilian area during the day, enabling a more realistic clinical assessment. The colonel assented and arranged for Kostya to occupy a standard room. Tatiana subsequently visited Kostya in his new accommodations, extending an apology and explaining the motive behind her actions during the session. He admitted that he had only learned of his son's existence a week before his mother's death, just prior to the fateful mission. Before parting, Kostya pressed her for the real reason he was being held, but Tatiana found herself unable to provide an answer. That night, she ventured into the observation room to encounter the alien creature once more. Her attempts to gain its attention led to a peculiar interaction. Tatiana tapped on the glass and then crouched down, patiently awaiting the creature's response. When it emerged, it mimicked her behavior, leaving her captivated by the enigmatic connection between the cosmonaut and the otherworldly entity. Observing the peculiar interaction between the creature and the cosmonaut's toy, Tatiana couldn't help but be intrigued. She requested permission to enter the room and interact with the creature. Colonel Semiradov consented, provided she wear a protective suit for her safety. Upon entering, she placed the toy on the floor and the creature immediately coiled around it. Tatiana's curiosity drove her to attempt physical contact, but she lost her balance and fell. The creature reacted swiftly, seizing her and dragging her towards it. General alarm sounded, and Tatiana was swiftly extracted from the room. Subsequently, Colonel Semiradov confronted the creature. That night, Tatiana, back in her room, was visited by the colonel. She shared her insights from the incident with the toy. Tatiana posited that the creature and the cosmonaut shared a unified consciousness, evident in its reaction to the toy that held great significance for Kostya. She further suggested that each night the creature spent more time outside Kostya's body, hinting at its potential independence from him in the future. Tatiana proposed that they return to Moscow, but the colonel refused, aware of the countless unknowns surrounding the creature. Later, she sought out Dr. Riggle, noticing an anomaly on one of the videotapes. He dismissed it as a glitch, but grew apprehensive when she inquired about the disparities in the cosmonaut's hormone levels between day and night. Tatiana suspected that the facility was feeding the creature something undisclosed to her. Rigel warned her to leave while she still could, but she proposed a partnership that could lead to a Nobel Prize for him without her seeking any personal recognition. Tatiana implored him to provide her with the missing information discreetly, bypassing the colonel's knowledge. Rigel concealed her in his vehicle and clandestinely transported her into the restricted part of the facility, setting the stage for a clandestine investigation. While Tatiana and Dr. Rigel were embroiled in their clandestine activities, Kostya found himself administered sedatives, rendering him unconscious before being wheeled back into the observational room. Inside the facility, Rigel parked the car and supplied Tatiana with night goggles, cautioning her that the battery had a limited 10-minute lifespan. He exited the vehicle, revealing a massive cage. Soldiers extracted a prisoner from a truck and placed him within the enclosure. The room plunged into darkness as they donned night goggles. The creature, having exited Kostya's body, was lured to the cage. Tatiana watched with mounting horror as it approached the prisoner, pounced, and gruesomely severed his head. Her involuntary gasp nearly gave her away, but Rigel managed to divert the soldier's attention, preserving her concealment. Subsequently, he drove her back to the dormitory, providing her with water and additional information. Rigel disclosed that the creature fed on cortisol, the fear hormone released in the brain, but emphasized that the notion of feeding it humans was the colonel's brainchild. Tatiana left the car, parting with a stinging accusation of cowardice. The following day, Tatiana approached Kostya and invited him for a run. As they jogged, she shared her plans to seek government help in separating him from the creature. However, Kostya abruptly returned to his quarters, instructing her to investigate whether she was being followed and to meet him in his block at 1 a.m. That night, as they administered his pills, Kostya pretended to swallow them, subsequently crushing and mixing the medication into his tea. Afterward, he left his room and engaged the nurse guarding him, persuading her to join him for a movie. She soon fell asleep on his shoulder. Kostya ingeniously dismantled the TV and removed the magnet. Meeting Tatiana as planned, he placed the magnet on the surveillance camera, generating an error that would assist them in their covert activities. The guard's suspicion was raised when he observed the camera malfunction, prompting him to investigate. Finding nothing amiss, he eventually left, allowing Kostya and Tatiana to move freely in front of the camera. Together, they ventured to the freezer room, where Kostya was confronted by the grisly sight of the deceased and scanned bodies. Tatiana inquired if he could feel the creature inside him. In response, Kostya revealed that he and the creature were intertwined, sharing an intricate connection that allowed him to recall in vivid detail all that the creature had witnessed. Within the freezer, Kostya's co-pilot remained among the living. He implored Tatiana to help him endure 2 more weeks in the institute until a review board from Moscow arrived, which could potentially secure his freedom. She questioned how he could tolerate the creature's murderous actions for an additional 2 weeks, but Kostya countered with a question of his own. What would she do in his place? Tatiana candidly replied that she would choose to end her own life, to which Kostya vehemently disagreed. He didn't want to be responsible for feeding the creature with human lives, nor did he want to die within those confines after all he had endured. Kostya's desire was to live and reunite with his son. In the orphanage, the child once again attempted to retrieve a package, leading to an altercation with the nurse. The child scratched her, prompting her to label it as an invalid. Returning to her room at the institute, Tatiana was accosted by 2 soldiers who escorted her to Colonel Semiradov's offices. There, a heated argument ensued regarding the moral implications of their actions concerning the creature. The colonel remained resolute in his belief that he was acting in the name of peace, while Tatiana opposed the idea of human sacrifice. In an attempt to make her understand, the colonel suggested they attend the creature's feeding together to witness it up close. At the feeding ground, 2 prisoners were brought into the cage, and the creature was released into their midst, setting the stage for a chilling confrontation. As the creature drew closer to the imprisoned men, Tatiana pleaded with the colonel to halt the impending tragedy, vowing to find an alternative means to feed the entity. She then made an audacious request, asking to be admitted inside the cage with the creature. Her desperation led her to sing the same song she had once heard Kostya sing, a haunting melody that seemed to soothe the creature. Rigel and the colonel observed this unprecedented act, with the doctor exclaiming that the creature had adapted, now capable of hearing. Simultaneously, while Tatiana sang to the creature, Kostya was depicted reacting in his room, no longer unconscious. One of the prisoners managed to free himself, and the creature detected his movements. It swiftly attacked and killed him during the feeding. Following the gruesome incident, Colonel Semiradov expressed hope to Tatiana that, with her assistance, they could eventually learn to control the creature. He implored her to set aside their differences for the sake of their common goal. The next day, Tatiana found herself working in the room with the co-pilot when Dr. Rigel entered. Speaking to him in Latin, she beseeched him to aid in her and Kostya's escape. Although reluctant, Rigel eventually agreed. He discreetly provided Tatiana with the sedative she needed, but requested that she keep his involvement a secret. Tatiana then approached the guard and administered the sedative. With Rigel's support, she went to retrieve Kostya. Inside his room, she discovered him on the floor. She informed him of the colonel's determination to retain the creature and her newfound strategy to expel it by injecting him with a combination of drugs mimicking a specific disease. Kostya hesitated, fearing that the creature had adapted and might survive outside him. Furthermore, he believed the creature had saved his life and advised Tatiana to escape because he believed it had chosen him for a reason. Kostya's internal turmoil was stirred by Tatiana's revelation, a poignant reminder of his responsibility for abandoning his son. Learning his child's name and age, he had a change of heart and decided to accompany her. The doctor, however, opted to remain behind. Tatiana and Kostya departed in the car that Rigel provided, leaving the doctor to make a fateful call to the authorities, divulging crucial information about the institute. Simultaneously, a soldier discovered the sedated guard and reviewed the surveillance footage, uncovering Tatiana and Kostya's escape. The colonel swiftly issued orders for a response team to retrieve Kostya and terminate Tatiana. The response team eventually caught up with Tatiana and Kostya, forcing them to seek refuge. Back at the office, Rigel was still on the phone when the colonel attempted to enter. Rigel hastily ended the call, but the colonel wasted no time in taking his life. While evading the soldiers, Kostya requested the syringe with the drugs. Tatiana tossed it to him, and he self-administered the drugs via injection into his heart. The creature promptly vacated his body and confronted the soldiers, leading to a violent confrontation. Bullets flew as the soldiers attempted to kill the creature, but it retaliated with lethal force. Tatiana managed to drag Kostya to a car, and they fled the institute's compound. In the midst of a climactic showdown, the colonel confronted the creature. Employing a smoke bomb and gunfire, he engaged in a fierce battle. Both were wounded in the fierce combat. While inside the car, Kostya coughed up blood, hinting at the dire consequences of their daring escape. Tatiana came to a heart-wrenching realization that Kostya couldn't survive without the creature. He insisted they could still escape, but she understood the truth. The two had become fully symbiotic, inseparable entities. The colonel arrived, and Tatiana made her stance clear, explaining that they were bound and could not be separated. Soldiers removed the creature from the car's trunk, and the colonel disarmed Tatiana. However, Kostya managed to exert control over the creature, which swiftly dispatched the soldiers. It then pursued the colonel, ultimately killing him. Tatiana rushed to check if Kostya was still alive, and the creature crawled toward them. Instead of harming her, it chose to re-enter Kostya's body. Tatiana proposed that she could separate them if she could get him to Moscow, but unexpectedly, Kostya took his own life. As Rigel's alerted authorities descended upon the scene, Tatiana made her way to Rostov, where the orphanage housing Kostya's son was located. In a poignant flashback, the determined child received the package it had sought. The nurse, finally acknowledging its persistence, handed it the package, revealing a pair of sneakers inside. Tatiana entered the orphanage and informed the reception guard that she was there to adopt Kostya's son. In the present, she waited outside for the boy. When he emerged, they warmly greeted each other and shared an embrace, finding solace and the promise of a new beginning together.